WNST Pittsburgh, but I avoided the last remnants of Orioles baseball over the weekend. Luke Jones did go out to the ballpark, and Luke, you and I spend lots and lots of time talking about football. We're going to be talking about football the next several months here. We got a pretty good team to talk about. But this is usually the time where the baseball thing goes away and it goes into the, into the closet for a little while, and we watch all these great teams play. We saw great baseball on Monday. We might see the Yankees get eliminated up at Buffalo Wild Wings with Willie Snead and Nick Boyle on Wednesday night up there swabbing. But, for the Orioles, I don't know what the next thing that happens that gets anyone's attention, but certainly the goodbye to Adam Jones and Buck Showalter got the attention of Orioles fans on Sunday. Maybe it's because the Ravens didn't play until 8 o'clock at night, but in the afternoon, the Orioles dominated the conversation, and maybe not in such a good way in regard to Adam Jones, I think.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. Clearly he was someone who was deserving of the recognition he received over the weekend and really over the last couple weeks whenever the Orioles played at home. The few people that were out there were getting a look at Adam Jones for a final time, and they recognized that. And from about the second week of September on, anytime the Orioles played at home, Adam noticeably got a bigger ovation. And at one point he quipped, well, I'm probably the only guy that people know at this point. But I think it was a little more than that, and I think it was very indicative of what he's meant to this organization for such a long time. Now, it's awkward because I keep getting the question from people on Twitter or friends of mine that follow the Orioles, and they kind of ask the question, why wouldn't Adam come back if he's willing to come back? And I think there are fair baseball reasons to say, well, you might as well get younger. You're talking about someone that's approaching his mid-30s, and the one area that the Orioles have some talent is in the outfield as far as some of their prospects that should be coming up over the next year or two. So I understand not wanting to lock into anything long-term, but you're also talking about someone who's been such an ambassador for the organization, has been such a big part of the community, and to wave goodbye in this way, knowing that he's not retiring, there definitely is some awkwardness that's laced into a very authentic token of appreciation that we saw Sunday, we saw throughout the weekend, and what's been a very, very forgettable season. I think that's something that shouldn't have been completely lost, and the fans that were out there over the final few games, good to see them show that appreciation. But again, there's still that sense of, does it really have to come to an end right now? Is it 100% set in stone that it must end at this point? And I don't think it's 100%, but it's certainly, you read the tea leaves, look at how he's approached the last few weeks of the season, things he said, things he's done.
Well, the goodbye out at second base would be a little weird if they signed him to a 2-year deal, but we thought Chris Davis was gone, right? We said goodbye to him, right? This wouldn't be B.J. Surhoff cried and then came back, whatever it was, 6 months later, 18 months, whatever it was. So, it's never goodbye for, who knows who's going to own this team? And I guess maybe peeling back the onion a little bit here beyond Adam Jones was the Tom Lavero piece in the Washington Times, as well as Rosenthal last month. Somebody's leaking something out of New York that there may be a little coup attempt here in the offseason. That's an interesting, as I wear my Free the Birds hat, that's kind of an interesting take on all of this, that when the earthquake or the tsunami comes to this organization, it might come all at once. And I thought it was going to come with the boys sort of like coming in and trying to run the place the right way. I don't know. I've asked around for the other people who have media passes that run around in the business department. Nobody's met John Vitelin yet. I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but all of this change that's supposed to be coming, something has to happen here to make it better in the offseason. I don't know if it's ownership change or not, but boy, that rumor got floated and I didn't even start it.
Yeah, and I've read the piece, and there was some speculative aspects to that, but certainly, and to what you alluded to with Ken Rosenthal, what he wrote in The Athletic a few weeks back, there's definitely a sense of Major League Baseball. And to be very clear, anytime there's going to be a transfer of ownership within a family or just a change of ownership in general with some team, whatever league, whether you're talking MLB, NFL, NBA, whatever, there's going to be internal discussion to make sure that there's a vetting process of some sort. I mean, ultimately, you're talking about people that own something, but as we've
Well, if
seen,
they would have given Jimmy Haslam the old Brett Kavanaugh treatment, maybe it wouldn't have come up so well. I mean, we've seen all of this in football. I mean, Jerry Richardson got squeezed out, right? So,
right.
I mean, on the baseball side of things, the John Henry, Miami, there's been a lot of hokey pokey in the days of Bud Selig, and that's how the team wound up in Washington to begin with, right? So I don't know what that coup would look like, but certainly Major League Baseball can't be happy with the way this looks, the loss, all of it that bakes into this, as well as maybe losing another 110 games next year. That's not good for Major League Baseball, for the Orioles to be this wayward, like Haiti after the storm. You know what I mean?
Well, I think you have to be careful about that part of it. I think much more of this is probably driven by the Masson dispute continuing and whether there's going to be a resolution this offseason, as some have speculated.
Really in year 13 of that, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more involved in that and the business side. I think you have to be very careful not to react to one. And I'm not talking the Orioles here. I'm talking if you're just Major League Baseball viewing one team losing. Okay, they lost 115 games. It was horrendous. There's no doubt about it. There have been plenty of horrendous teams that have lost a ton of games. So I think you need to be careful not to overreact to that aspect of it as much. But I do think, considering the issues that Major League Baseball has had with Peter Angelos over the years, and certainly the Masson dispute being at the top of the list, I think it's probably more driven there. Will there be a coup? I think it's hard to assume that's going to happen, but there certainly has to be some interest, some concern, some questioning as far as, okay, if Peter is no longer in control, is no longer calling the shots, and it is John or Lou, I mean, that's a question right there in and of itself if you're Major League Baseball, what that decision-making process looks like, and what's their long-term vision? What do they hope to get out of it? Those are questions that Major League Baseball very fairly should be asking and should ask of any ownership group when there's some kind of transition as far as a change in authority as far as who's making the decision. So,
well, look, if there was a standard about how the place was run, turning down marketing deals based on not liking the brand, banning media members, that doesn't happen anywhere else. And from their perspective all along, it's been poorly run, which is why it looks the way it looks. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in Major League Baseball that thinks the Orioles have been well run. Their fans can't access their games on mobile devices, as you well know, and many of our friends out of town, the Chris Pikas and the people that don't live in town, also have these issues. David Katz talks about this all the time from out in L.A., who, by the way, just took over Fox Sports. So kudos to my dear friend David Katz, the other David Katz, by the way, the cool one, the nice one. But Luke, I would say my feeling on this as a fan is these kids can't be any worse at this than their old man. So I don't feel like if there was a standard already that this thing hasn't dropped, what's Harbaugh's line, below the bar, right? This thing's been below the bar for so long that I don't know that there is a bar. I don't know that there's a floor either, bro. I've been asking that question all century. So if it's about them being sticky about this, but if it's about them like, look, someone needs to run the franchise better for everyone, including our brand at Major League Baseball, and we're going to install ownership, and young men move aside, and here's the $900 million we owe you for this, minus the $200 million you owe the learners. We'll see you later. Here's the check. And if they're willing to accept that, great. If not, they go. But I would think they're going to place this because they don't want this winding up in a courtroom in New York the way it did 25 years ago. That's how this happened to begin with. This is the only franchise ever that went somewhere outside of where they wanted it to go, and it's been a frigging nightmare for a quarter of a century for any of these cats that have been around long enough to witness it.
Yeah, and I hear you, and certainly there's a lot of unknown as far as what this is going to look like if the Angelos family is going to continue to own the Orioles and run the Orioles. So, but at the same time, if you're Major League Baseball and you look at it from that lens, they're also coming off of very recently a 5-year period where they did win a lot of games. Now, we can certainly debate who was responsible for that, but I think it's a little bit trickier to kind of just view it from the lens that, okay, they lost 115 games. They were, up in the top 5 as far as most losses in a season in modern history. I get all of that, but you can't react to just that part of it. I still think the Masson part, the Masson aspect of this, it would be the biggest driving force if you're Major League Baseball attempting to influence the transfer of power, who's going to own it, all of that. So there's just a whole lot of unknown here, and when it gets resolved, it's hard to say. I think, first and foremost, if you're looking at it from just the baseball standpoint, I think fans would absolutely like to see resolution in the first 48 to 72 hours after the season officially comes to an end, some kind of definitive statement on the futures of Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette. Letting that linger just because they're technically under contract through the month of October, that's serving no purpose whatsoever, but just to feed into what you were just talking about as far as concerns that Major League Baseball would have, concerns that anyone who has any kind of interest in the Orioles, whether it's fandom or business side, I think there needs to be some kind of definitive statement, decision made, whatever. Even if it's as simple as putting out a statement thanking Buck Showalter and or Dan Duquette for their services. Are they keeping Dan Duquette? I know that certainly he's proceeded over the last 2 months, and he's made decisions over the last 2 months that would lead you to believe that he might be sticking around. And I know Bob Nightingale reported as much, even though there have been some reports since then that have said no decision has been made. So, these are the types of things that certainly isn't going to help the Angelos family's cause if Major League Baseball truly is watching with that kind of a discerning eye, and they just say, well, that Masson's one thing, that's something we're really concerned about, but you can't even put out a decision or put out a statement or make a decision about your manager and general manager who have been a big part of the most successful 5-year period that you did have over the last 25 years. So, you just look at it from that aspect, and it just leaves you with the same feeling of confusion and uncertainty and a lot of concern because, while certainly Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette and Adam Jones and people that have, players who've already been sent off, and you can go down the list, and no one's perfect. No one should be absolved. Certainly, they all played a hand to some degree in where they are at this point, but if you're going to make change, you better be careful as far as bringing in people that are going to get this thing turned around and not just driving it further into the abyss. So you're kind of just waiting. And again, you want to take 24 hours, 48 hours to let people kind of bask in the celebration of Adam Jones. Buck Showalter got a warm reception on Sunday, as he should, as he deserved. But beyond that 24 to 48 hours, you need to start moving, and you need to start expressing to your fan base, to your corporate sponsors, to Major League Baseball that you've got a hold on this thing as far as starting to move forward now and getting yourself back to respectability and hopefully contention at some point in the next few years, and not looking at 10 to 15 years of what we saw from 98 through 2011, let's put it that way.
Luke Jones is here. We're talking a little Oriole baseball. It's all brought to you by all of our sponsors. I'm going to go through all of our sponsors all week because we've had so many new sponsors. People come to me all the time and say, who's with Nestor Al? Who's with WNST? Where are they at? Well, first off, on the WNST website, all of our sponsors are up there. We're very, very appreciative to all of them. But we're going to start with this. Wednesday night, we're going to be out at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air. We'll be swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry with our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. That starts at 7:30 p.m. Willie Snead's going to be with us. Nick Boyle's going to be with us. We're going to be talking about Nick Boyle's poster and the pets and the Show Your Soft Side campaign. So we're going to give a plug out there, as well as for blood cancer patients. That's all brought to you by Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. I got beautiful flowers here all week long. That's Sporticulture. That's my friend Court. You can learn more at Culture, all one word, sporticulture.com. They're grown locally, shipped anywhere, officially licensed, and they smell really nice. So go check that out as well. Strategic Factory's with us now. I'm wearing my Strategic Factory shirt here today and a little button-up. I know I'm a T-shirt and a ball cap kind of guy, but Strategic Factory does it all. Printing, marketing, lots of solutions. If you own a business and you need to market, please check them out. StrategicFactory.com. We'll be telling you more about them. The Modell Lyric, I'm getting ready for Steely Dan next week, and John Mayer on Sunday night for the Kimmel Cancer Center. That's awesome. There's magic at the Modell Lyric. Learn more at modell-lyric.com. Charles Newsonoff and Son since 1923. Sydney hasn't been doing it since 1923, but his family has. CharlesNewsonoff.com. Let's grow old together. The Lee Tessier team selling my condo right now. Baltimore's premier realty team and the people I trust with my real estate. Go to leetessier.com to learn more there. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Tasty coffee, the best fried chicken in the land, and the Western fries. It's all at Row Faux. And I got my Pizza John's cup here, and I want to mess with Luke because he can't have Pizza John's right now, but I'm going to get him hungry. He'll be down there on Saturday. Back Riverneck Road in Essex. 50 years, just like me next week. I'll be in Nashville. Luke was in Pittsburgh, and now we're in Baltimore trying to figure out the offseason of the Baltimore Orioles. Luke, what's the first thing you sort of expect to happen, right? Like, the manager thing to me would be the obvious thing to say, Buck, yes or no. And if you haven't figured it out by now, I mean, you and I got into a long debate about this on our flight, not on the air, about Adam Jones and the angst about Adam Jones and not going to Philadelphia and not accepting the trade and why. And part of it was the communication part that they never talked to him about this. Dude, is there any chance that Buck Showalter and John and Lou Angelos and Brady Anderson haven't had a glass of wine at some point when you're 100 games underwater, that at some point in the last 90 days they haven't at least felt each other out or given a smoke signal? I mean, dude, is it that bad communicatively that you really would need a dusting off period after losing 115 games to figure out what you want to do?
Well, I mean, that's the big question. I mean, there was such a sense of unknown over the last couple months. Really, go back before that. I mean, really, face it, from the third week of April 1, we knew this team wasn't contending. And we knew this team, from about late May on, had a really good chance to be historically terrible. So it's not like this is something that you couldn't see coming. As it relates to Adam Jones, they came to him, but they came to him so late in the process. And Adam's someone who has principle, really it feels the value of being respected. And there was some lack of communication there that I think absolutely contributed to him not wanting to waive his no-trade clause, in addition to going somewhere and platooning and not knowing what your playing time is going to be and how that might impact your market. So, there were some very legitimate reasons that he vetoed it, and there were some things that the Orioles could have handled better in that process. But to get back to what you just said, you would like to think that some conversations, informally, at the very least, took place at some point. And there was a thought for the longest time when Peter Angelos was still in charge, and there wasn't this question that we've had over the last year to 18 months as far as how much influence does Peter have? Is he running the show? Is it John and Lou a little bit more? Is Peter kind of in and out? But there had been an understanding for quite a long time that Buck Showalter would basically be able to stay as long as he wanted to. There was that understanding, and there was that good relationship between Buck and Peter. And obviously, with that uncertainty as far as ownership now, it's to me it's become apparent that that's changed. That doesn't mean that it was going to be 100% Buck being gone, but I think based on what how he's responded, how he's talked, I think there's probably a sense of resignation there that he's probably not going to be back. But again, when no one has definitively communicated that,
well, it would seem to me if you lost 115 games, ownership would look at it and say, we don't want you anymore, or we do want you. And if we really do want Buck Showalter to be the guy, that it wouldn't matter whether they lost 95 or 110 or 115. Yeah. He would say, I like Cedric. I like these young kids. I'll give you 2 more years. I'll see you through this transition here. But I don't know that they have their act together enough to even know what the transition is, right? I mean, whether it's Brady or whether it's Duquette, it feels like it's stuck in the mud. And when you start to hear out of New York that New York doesn't know who's running the franchise, if the commissioner of the league doesn't know, how can Buck Showalter know?
Sure.
I mean,
and that's one thing that I've said to you.
It's disgraceful.
And look, I'm not the only person who's said this, but there have been so many examples of reporters even being contacted by members of the organization, from the top on down. Whether you're just talking staffers or people working in the minor leagues, minor league coaches, constantly reaching out to reporters, just asking, "Hey, have you heard anything?"
I'm one of those guys, by the way.
Yeah, so
I have 2 or 3 friends still, in the mothership over there, and people reaching. Yeah, nobody knows. And by the way, it affects their lives so greatly.
No doubt.
Because everyone in their life doesn't just care about whether they keep their job at Xerox or IBM or Amazon or WNST, but, they work in baseball and they love everyone in their life loves baseball and loves the Orioles and is concerned for them, but also just wants to say, hey, who's managing the team? What's going on? I love the team. And they have no answers, which is embarrassing. I mean, it's been embarrassing for 25 years. I mean, I haven't been the guy on the air like Rick Dempsey and Mike Bordick and, the people over 105.7 and, making excuses for all of this. I've been the only honest one. Now it's just sort of sitting there and obvious for the Adam Joneses and the Buck Showalters as to why, and the empty stadium, as to why this is the S show that it is. And now it's completely out in the open again. And there's nobody coming with a fire hose, which is the part that really blows my mind. That Brady Anderson hasn't said, I am the representative, the family loves me, let me get out here and fix things up a little bit. I don't think Brady's capable of that, man. I mean, that's not what he does. And I don't think Dan Duquette certainly doesn't do that. He can't even get along with Adam Jones.
Yeah, and that's why there's concern. There's no doubt about it.
John Vitalin's going to come in off a plane from Miami? I mean, come on. I mean, a human being needs to be involved in fixing this. Just like the city, just like the government, just like any organization. There needs to be someone special running the place and recruiting people and communicating with people and being in the business of information, goodwill, integrity, honesty, commitment. I don't know, someone that sort of looks like Dick Cass a little bit, after a dozen years. Someone that is a grown-up in front of it.
I agree. We've talked about this at how many different points. I mean, to me, if I were John Angelos or Lou Angelos, pick one. Flip the coin. I don't care which of the Angelos sons had done it. I would have held a press conference at some point during the season. And look, you didn't have to make any changes at that point. I was very unmoved about the idea of, well, you have to fire Buck Showalter. You weren't saving the season anyway. You just weren't. So what were you going to do? What, you're going to bring in a brand new manager and suddenly the Orioles are going to win 50 of their last 60? No, the season had been lost. So that part of it, whatever. But to me, there absolutely was and has always been value in what Steve Bisciotti does for the Ravens, even if part of that is mandated by the NFL. But each team has to do a state of the organization press conference at the end of the season, but you don't have to have your owner involved with that. But how much value to me there would have been in having John Angelos or Lou Angelos or both of them hold court with the media in June after the trade deadline, whenever. It didn't have to be every week, but just have something. Get out in front of cameras and recorders, and put it on Masson and flat out say, hey, we understand this is really messed up right now. This is unacceptable. This is so far below the bar. We're just coming off of a relatively successful 5-year run that we were proud of, even though we didn't get to the pinnacle. And we know we need to make changes. We know we need to be much, much better than this. We're going to be evaluating over the next couple months. We're going to have to make some difficult decisions. We know not all of these decisions are going to be popular necessarily because it's going to involve saying goodbye to some key players, saying goodbye to certain members of the brass that have been integral to our success, but that's part of what happens when you need to rebuild and reload and set a new path. And we're going to be working our tails off to figure that out, come up with a plan over the next couple months, and we'll be revealing that almost immediately after the season comes to an end. And there would have been so much value to doing that, and you wouldn't have had to make a single decision when you got out in front of that and it made that proclamation. And then you could have just gone into it, and whether it's the first Monday, Black Monday they always call it in the NFL, or Tuesday or Wednesday, give yourself 2 or 3 days to let all the feelings of the weekend and the nostalgia that was out there at the ballpark with Jones and Buck and anyone else you wanted to try to point to, but then you get to work, and then you start laying the groundwork, and you say, thank you so much, Buck Showalter, for your contributions over the last...
Well, here's the point, dude. Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, like this week, who's working on behalf of the organization?
Exactly. And that's my whole point.
There's only 365 days in a year. Who's doing the work right now, right?
Right. And that's why, to me, there was so much value to having that press conference, or that. And the Orioles do this with their season ticket holders usually in July, somewhere around there. They actually have a Q&A with Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette. To me, that would have been a hell of an opportunity to get one of the Angelos sons there and answer some questions. And it's a season ticket holder fan base.
The Angelos boys don't want questions. That's why I don't have a press pass.
But I'm saying if you had seen that, then I think people would feel a heck of a lot better about what's coming in what you assume is going to be the coming days as far as manager decision, GM decision. Is Dan Duquette staying in the same capacity? There's been lots of debate about that. I think there's enough smoke there to suggest that perhaps Dan Duquette's going to stay, but is he staying in the same capacity? What's his role going to be? How defined is it going to be? Is he going to answer to Brady Anderson now? There's just so many questions, and okay, we didn't hear anything on Monday. That's fine, but if this lingers, and we're saying the same thing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, this is going into next week, and you can't even give us a resolution on Buck Showalter. Really? That speaks to the growing lack of confidence that whoever's making the decisions is going to make decisions definitively and make them with conviction and really chart out a path for this team to get back to respectability. So until that happens, we're left with that same feeling of, okay, have you heard anything? What's going on?
Well, dude, the place was a disgrace when the old man ran it, really tried to run it. Can you imagine him at the end, obstinate, sitting up and saying nothing happens until I say it happens, and who figures out whether he factors in this? Because if he's not factoring in this, then who is factoring in the... Jim Palmer is talking to people about not knowing what the hell's going on, right? Literally, he's out on the internet now, and you're never really getting the truth from him because he's getting paid by them. He's not allowed to give you the truth. That's been part of this issue over the last 25 years as to what the truth is and who's allowed to criticize it and where the fans get their information from. But this is a pretty damning week, I think, here in a month that you lose 115 games and nobody's even out there to take responsibility or accountability for it. It's disgraceful. It really is.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not.
How can anybody support this with their money? It's you know what I mean? And if you are supporting it with your money, what do you expect from them? At this point, it's so below the bar that They don't have to do anything. They haven't done anything through 115 losses, really. To your point, there's been nothing from anybody other than dealing a bunch of baseball players and propping Dan Duquette up, who looks like, as I said earlier in the summer, like Weekend at Bernie's, every time he sits up. And he looked like he was running the place, but even he doesn't have a gig, right? Officially, at the end of the month.
Well, he doesn't have a contract beyond the end of the month. That at least has been communicated to media and the public. So, look, I don't need the Orioles to go out there and hire a manager next week, per se, but at least start laying the groundwork of what your vision's going to be. If Buck Showalter's not going to be your manager, and to be very clear, I'd move on. I would wipe the slate clean. I wouldn't have Buck or Dan Duquette back, quite frankly, because I think there's enough of the blame to go around for both of them. That to me, it's time. There was a good run, and I think it's time to start new. But whatever you decide to do, communicate that. And you don't have to have a Buck Showalter's replacement hired when you make the announcement. Just thank Buck for his service and move on. And, in the case of Dan Duquette, if you're keeping him, or if you're going to keep him but he's going to head up the international scouting and he's going to run that because that's something he did well in Boston and Montreal way back when, then communicate that and say that you're going to be hiring a new head of baseball ops or whatever. But this idea of continuing to just do nothing and kicking the can down the road that really we've seen for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's not as though you couldn't see this coming. Now, let me be clear. I didn't see them losing 115 games. I didn't think it would get to that point. But the Orioles heading towards the proverbial cliff, we've been talking about that for the better part of the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, it wasn't hard to see that because you just looked at when everyone's contracts were expiring, or in the case of Manny Machado, when his club control was up and he was going to be hitting free agency. So there's just such a sense of no long-term planning whatsoever here that you get to the end of the season and you say, okay, well, the baseball's over. You decided you weren't going to fire Buck Showalter or Dan Duquette in season. Fine, but someone needs to talk. Someone needs to show that they're the captain of the ship here. And you don't have to have all the answers immediately, but you need to at least express that, okay, this individual is not going to be back, this individual is not going to be back, this individual is going to be back. We need to hire positions A, B, C, and D. You can already see that we're rebuilding on the field. We're heading towards the direction of young players. We understand that that's not going to look pretty in the wins and losses department for the next year or two, most likely, but stick with us. This is our plan. This is our vision. We are going to get more involved in the international scouting market. We're going to do more in analytics. We're going to get more cutting edge in nutrition and sports science and things of that nature, things that other teams are doing that the Orioles haven't been doing as much of in recent years. But lay all that out. Put all your cards on the table. And you might be surprised that more people might be inclined to be patient if you express all of that. But to continue to just have the man behind the curtain format that has been prevalent for so long, and people asking questions even inside your own organization, it just leads to having no confidence, no vote of faith whatsoever from anyone that you know what you're doing. And again, you don't have to have everything. You don't have to make every hire on October 2nd. That's not the way it has to work. But at least express some semblance of awareness and understanding the gravity of the situation, that you're going to make some difficult decisions and there's going to be some losing and it's going to be painful, and you're asking fans to stick with you and to be patient, but to also understand that you're going to hire some really good people to make those decisions and get yourselves back on track. So it's not that part shouldn't be that difficult. The difficult part is picking the right person to run baseball ops. The difficult part is finding the right manager and hiring the right scouts, and not just investing money in the international market, but investing it wisely. Those are the difficult things. But communicating your intentions and making decisions and just being, just respectful to individuals like Buck Showalter, who, if he isn't going to come back, fine, but he's still done such a good job here over the years that he deserves some dignity on the way out the door. Those aspects of it should be easy. And if you can't even get that part right, then no one's going to have confidence that you're going to be able to right this ship and turn this thing around from a big picture standpoint.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and we will be together all week long. And Owings Mills getting ready for it's Cleveland week now. It used to be Pittsburgh week. And by the way, Luke, I know we don't like to talk too much about birthdays here, especially as I turn 50 next week. But happy birthday to you this week as well. I read about that ad on the internet. I hear you're 29 all over again, right?
Oh yeah, 29 for what, the 7th straight year? Yeah, I'm 35. I appreciate that. Definitely. I always joke with people, all you have to do is look at me to realize how long it's been for the Orioles winning a World Series. I was 2 weeks old when Cal Ripken caught the line drive in Game 5, and the Orioles celebrated at the Vet. So you see how old I'm getting. It just says
what happened on October 2nd? Was like, did Landrum hit the home run? And I mean, like, what?
No. I'm pretty sure October 2nd was the final day of the regular season. I'm pretty sure off the top of my head because I'm.
Your mother would remember this, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. I mean, the story is, my mom was in labor, and I think Dad was, keeping an eye on the Orioles.
You were born on the last day of the '83 season.
Yeah.
The Orioles won a 2-0 shutout. Boddicker pitched to get primed up for the Chicago White Sox. The next start he made was one of the great nights of my life. I went with Pete Raffalidis and John Raffalidis' dad. He had seats behind home plate, upper 39, about 10 rows up for the Boddicker shutout over the White Sox in Game 2. That's one of my favorite baseball memories. So there you have it. You were born that week. Feels like about a minute ago, Luke.
Yeah, but unfortunately for the Orioles, it's been much longer than a minute ago. But, yeah, I'm 2 weeks old when the Orioles last won the World Series.
Dude, you ever met Boddicker?
You know what? I don't think I have.
You know what, man? If you ever meet Boddicker, you should tell him that the day you were born, he beat the Yankees on the last day of the '83 season. I bet, that's a good story,
Yeah, but it also reminds people of how old they are.
It was a shutout. I mean, blanked the Yankees 2-0. Let me see how he pitched that day. Let's see if he remembers. In the lineup that day for the Yankees, Willie Randolph, Ken Griffey, Don Mattingly, Greg Nettles, Butch Weiniger, Roy Smalley. Boy, the Yankees had bought a lot of players right around that era, didn't they? They had they brought Nettles back, I think. Well, no, Nettles was still there. He would go to San Diego the next year. Let's see here. Boddicker went 5 innings. Sammy Stewart 2 innings of relief, and Tippy came in to close it out. So there you have it.
There you go. And you hear that Yankees lineup, and that led to them being awful in the late 80s. And so.
Oh, by the way, one hit that day. The Yankees had. Ken Griffey got a single. There you go.
Hey, the Orioles hit the Astros on Sunday, so there you go.
The Orioles threw a one-hitter on the day you were born at the end of the '80s. How can I know you this long and not know these fun statistics about you, man?
Well, they had already locked up the East, so it's not like they were playing anything on the second.
So I remember that month like it was yesterday. So I was in high school. It was my junior year of high school. And I had tickets for I went to a bunch of the games. The World Series game I missed was Game 3, which happened on my birthday, which was October the 14th. And that was the Benny Ayala, Jim Palmer started that game. And the Orioles won. It kind of swung the series big time. But I missed that game, and that was my birthday because Dundalk High had the Sadie Hawkins dance that night. And I decided to go to the Sadie Hawkins dance instead of Game 3. And I went to Game 4 with Sue Monday, and I went to Game 5 with my dad. So, and the night they won. So, great memories of – that was a great month in my life, brother. I got a lot of pictures from the month you were born, if you want them, all right?
Very cool. And I just want to chime in there with that. My dad was an usher beginning in 1983 at Memorial Stadium. And to speak to what kind of father he was, and I like to think I'm – half the guy he was, I'd be happy if people would say that about me. But he skipped the 1983 World Series to be home with my mom and watch the Orioles win the World Series with his 2-week-old son.
So he had a free pass to stand in the stadium being an usher and stayed home with mom instead.
And anyone who's hearing this thinking, well, he must not have been. The man was the biggest Orioles fan you would know. Oh, totally. And I told him that, up until the final year he was with us. I always told him he was nuts, but he never once expressed any regret to me about that. He wanted to be with my mom, who was a first-time mother, and wanted to be with his son. And I think that's pretty cool. It really speaks to his character. And
he had to listen to Howard Cosell call the games, too.
Right, exactly. So, really speaks to the kind of man he was. But
same kind of man I am, the kind of guy that would want to be home listening to Jim Palmer call the games. Except Jim Palmer wasn't calling.
But huge baseball fan, so where I am today, I really owe that to him and to my mom, of course.
Have you watched those 83 broadcasts? Because we show them on the buses all the time.
Yeah. I've seen. I mean, I can't say I've sat there and watched all 5 games in their entirety, but
it was Al Michaels, Howard Cosell, and Earl Weaver, in the booth, and Reggie Jackson did the post-game celebration with Altobelli and those
guys. Did Earl have the perm working at that point?
Oh, my God. It was silver. It was luscious. It was, you wanted to run your fingers through it. You know what I mean? It was Jerry Curl Earl.
Oh, yeah. How about that?
Nice work. Luke Jones, happy birthday. Everybody knows Luke. Send him an email right now. Reach your phone. Luke at WNST.net. Throw him a note, and a Baltimore Luke. And instead of cake, I'm going to serve pizza because Luke loves some Pizza John. So I'll and by the way, they have ice cream, and they do have cakes down there, but he, just give Luke the one with the meat sauce, and he's happy. All right, you can find me out on the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. We're not just bitching about the Orioles around here. We're praising the Ravens this week. Lots of Cleveland stuff. The Terps going to the big house. Caps raising the banner. We're at Buffalo Wild Wings on Wednesday night with 2 Ravens, Willie Snead and Nick Boyle. Come on out, get swapped for the Bone Marrow Registry. It's all brought to you by Freedmont Mortgage. Want to give some more love to our sponsors, King Discount Liquors and Pizza John's. I took Pizza John's over to King Discount Liquors because they love it over there. Give my love to Johnny Bevan, the King All-Stars, and I tell them I appreciate them all back last week as well. When you're in Essex, make sure you're stopping and seeing Al's Seafood as well. My man Chad, the crab man's down there. Still the big fat crabs. They'll tell you get the best crabs of the year in September and October. Any crab person will tell you that. So at some point, these hands are going to get messy for my 50th birthday. I got to have crabs for my 50th birthday. I'm going to do the crab tour. I'm going to all my crab houses, so get ready. Nick, Pete, coming to see you down at Costas. I'm going up to Michael's for crab cakes. I'll be at Box Hill. It's going to be like a crab month for me. Rocktober. Might start it with the Hall of Fame this weekend in Cleveland, too. I might even go to the Christmas Story house without my wife because I'm tired of waiting. It's my birthday. I'll do what I want all month long. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.